I don't know why my parents resent me so much. They handed my siblings $200,000 each, then left me with nothing. After that, I was on my own. I worked hard, built my own success, and now, ironically, they come to me asking for help. But karma has its way of settling things. I'm Michael, 27 years old. If I had to sum up my life, I'd say I was always the forgotten one, the overlooked child, the one who didn't shine bright enough in my parents' eyes. I have two siblings, an older sister, Sarah, and a younger brother, Chris. They were the golden children, the ones who could do no wrong, the ones my parents lavished with attention, praise, and support. Meanwhile, I was just there, existing. Sarah was the picture-perfect daughter. Straight A's, involved in every school club, the type who never missed a single extracurricular activity. When she got accepted into an Ivy League college, my parents lost their minds with excitement. They threw a massive party in her honor, inviting friends, relatives, everyone they could think of. It was like a second Christmas, except the only gift that mattered was Sarah's academic success. Chris, on the other hand, didn't even have to try. Things just worked out for him. He followed Sarah's path, breezed through school, and landed himself in a prestigious graduate program. My parents pulled out all the stops for him too, fully paid tuition, a brand new laptop, even rent money to help him settle in. He never had to struggle. Every step of the way, they made sure he had everything he needed. And then, there was me. I didn't make it into an Ivy League school. I got into a solid state university, a good school, but nothing my parents were proud of. When I told them I'd been accepted, they barely reacted. A nod, a half-hearted, "That's great, Michael." And that was it. No party, no celebration, no excitement. I'd be lucky if they even ordered takeout that night. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But the older I got, the more obvious the difference became. It wasn't just about attention, it was about money, too. For Sarah's wedding, my parents spent $200,000. No exaggeration. They went all out. The grand venue, 5-star catering, an extravagant designer dress. They even flew in distant relatives from across the country. It was treated like the social event of the year. For Chris, they covered his entire graduate education and helped him financially until he was stable. He never had to worry about student loans or rent. And Emily, the youngest, got the same treatment. Fully paid tuition, no debt to her name. But me? When I was starting out in my career and needed basic tools for work, things that were absolutely necessary just to get started, I turned to my parents for a little help. They gave me $7,000. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not ungrateful. $7,000 is a significant amount of money. But when you compare that to $200,000 for a wedding or an entire tuition bill being paid off, it's like handing someone pennies when they're watching others get piles of gold. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about what it represented. Every time we had family gatherings, I felt like an outsider. At dinners, the conversation revolved around Sarah's high-powered job, Chris's latest accomplishment, their vacations, their luxury home upgrades. They would gush over new business ventures, expensive purchases, and all the milestones they hit. And I'd sit there in silence, pushing food around my plate, trying to find something, anything, to add to the conversation. But what could I even say? Hey, I finished a big project at work, and I'm still making car payments. Compared to their lives, my achievements felt insignificant. And maybe that's exactly how they saw me, insignificant. I remember one particular dinner, about a year ago, that really stuck with me. We were all gathered around the table, and as usual, the conversation drifted to Sarah's latest plans. "Oh, we're going to Europe for a few weeks," she said, swirling her drink like it was just another casual getaway. "It's just so nice that Mom and Dad could help out with the expenses." Chris chimed in right after her, nodding like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Honestly, I don't know what we would have done without that $200,000 for the wedding," he said, completely unfazed. And then there was Emily, laughing as she added, "I'm just glad tuition hikes never affected me. Thanks to Mom and Dad, I don't have to worry about student loans at all." I sat there, staring down at my plate, trying to ignore the sharp sting in my chest. It wasn't just about the money. It was the fact that they had been handed their futures while I had to fight tooth and nail for mine. I had taken out loans, worked extra hours, struggled to afford even the basics. Every dollar I earned felt like a battle, while they lived in a world where financial struggles were just a foreign concept. And the worst part? No one even noticed that I wasn't part of the conversation. I could feel the frustration building inside me, my face growing hot, my hands tightening into fists beneath the table. I tried to swallow it down, tried to let it go like I always had. But this time I couldn't. Before I could stop myself, I muttered under my breath, "Must be nice." Silence. The whole table went quiet. Every single pair of eyes turned to me. Sarah was the first to speak. "What's that supposed to mean, Michael?" Her expression was a mix of confusion and mild annoyance, like she genuinely couldn't understand why I might be upset. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check, but it all came spilling out anyway. "It means that not all of us get everything handed to us on a silver platter," I said, my voice tight. "Some of us actually have to work for what we need." Chris leaned back in his chair, unfazed, smirking like this was just another one of my episodes. "Michael, you're always acting like the victim," he said, his voice laced with condescension. "Didn't Mom and Dad help you get those tools for work?" That hit a nerve. Sure, they had given me $7,000, but when I compared that to the six-figure checks they had casually handed my siblings, it felt like pocket change. "Yeah, they helped," I admitted, my voice laced with frustration. "But $7,000 compared to hundreds of thousands? It's not the same, and you know it." Mom, ever the peacemaker, jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "Michael, we thought that's what you needed," she said gently. "We've always tried to give you what was fair." "Fair?" The bitterness rose in my throat before I could stop it. "Fair," I repeated, my voice shaking. "You think this is fair? You've given them everything. You practically paved their roads for them while I had to build mine from scratch." The conversation spiraled from there. Everyone had something to say. Excuses, justifications, reasons why I was overreacting. "You're blowing this out of proportion," Dad said, shaking his head. "We gave you what you needed." Needed. That was the part that hurt the most. They didn't care about what I wanted, what I dreamed of, or what I had to sacrifice. They only gave me what they thought was enough. Just enough to keep me from complaining. I couldn't take it anymore. Without another word, I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the floor with a sharp, grating sound. The voices of my family trailed behind me as I walked away, but I didn't turn back. I was done. Done being the forgotten one. Done being the afterthought. Done accepting scraps while they feasted. For the first time in my life, I walked away, this time for good. When I stormed out of the house that night, I was burning with rage. I don't think I'd ever been that furious before. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst right out of my chest, and with every step down the driveway, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just knew I had to get out, get as far away from that house as possible. It was late, probably close to 10 p.m., and the streets were unsettlingly quiet. That eerie kind of silence where everything feels too still, too empty. The only sound was the steady rhythm of my footsteps hitting the pavement. I didn't bother pulling out my phone or putting in my headphones. I wasn't in the mood for distractions. I needed to think. The dinner replayed in my mind like a broken record. Chris's smug smirk, Sarah's condescending tone, the way everyone else had brushed off my frustration like I was just being overly sensitive. It was like they all lived in this comfortable little bubble of privilege, completely blind to how suffocating it was for me. They had no idea what it felt like to be on the outside looking in, watching as they were handed everything while I had to fight for every scrap. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I kept replaying the argument, wishing I had said more, had made them really listen. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have mattered. No matter what I said, no matter how much I tried to make them understand, nothing would change. They had their version of the truth, and I had mine. And those two realities were never going to align. Without even realizing it, my feet had taken me to an old park not far from the house, a place I used to go as a kid whenever I needed to be alone. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small playground with a few swings and a slide, but tucked away in the far corner, hidden beneath a cluster of trees, was an old wooden bench. I had spent countless afternoons there when I was younger, escaping into my own world. And tonight, it was exactly where I needed to be. I sank onto the bench, leaning back against the cold, weathered wood, and tilted my head up toward the sky. It was one of those rare, clear nights where the stars stretched endlessly across the darkness. Normally, that kind of view would calm me, remind me how small my problems were in the grand scheme of things. But tonight, it didn't help. All I could think about was how unfair everything had been. How I had spent my whole life trying to prove myself, trying to be enough, only to be treated like an afterthought. It wasn't just about the money. It was never just about the money. It was about feeling valued, seen, respected. And for whatever reason, my parents had decided a long time ago that my dreams, my needs, didn't matter as much as Sarah's or Chris's. A buzz in my pocket snapped me out of my thoughts. For a second, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the best of me. I pulled out my phone and saw Emily's name on the screen. Michael, where did you go? You need to come back. Let's talk about this. Talk. Yeah, I'd heard that before. Talking never changed anything in my family. It always followed the same script. Mom and Dad justifying their choices, explaining why things were the way they were, and me being expected to just accept it, to move on, to let it go. Not this time. I locked my phone without replying and shoved it back into my pocket. I wasn't ready to deal with Emily or anyone else, for that matter. Not tonight. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair as my thoughts circled back to the same frustrating questions. Had I ever really mattered to them? Had they ever once stopped to consider how their choices made me feel? I wasn't a perfect kid, but did that mean I deserved to be treated like I was worth less than my siblings? I kicked a small rock near my foot, watching as it rolled across the playground, disappearing into the darkness. I couldn't sit here forever. As much as the idea of never stepping foot in that house again was tempting, I knew I had to face reality at some point. I had decisions to make. Maybe this was the breaking point. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fit into a family that never really. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, the cold started to settle in. Fall was creeping closer, and the night air had that sharp edge to it. I pulled my jacket tighter, but it wasn't enough to stop the wind from biting through the thin fabric. I thought about going home, about walking back through that front door, facing them all after everything that had happened. The idea alone made my stomach twist. Then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a call. Emily's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to shut her out the way they had shut me out for years. But another part, one I wasn't sure I wanted to acknowledge, wondered if maybe, just maybe, she actually understood this time. I hesitated, then finally swiped to answer. Michael, where are you? Emily's voice came through steady, but there was that usual undertone, calm, collected, a little too put together. That hint of superiority that always grated on my nerves. Doesn't matter, I said flatly. I'm not coming back tonight. She sighed, like she was already tired of this conversation. Come on, you're being ridiculous. We're family. We need to talk this out. Talk. I let out a bitter laugh. You mean the kind of talk where I get told I should be grateful for whatever scraps I get while you all pat yourselves on the back for being such amazing siblings? That's not fair, she snapped back. We didn't know you felt like this. I clenched my jaw. How could you not know? My voice rose despite myself. Every single time we sit down as a family, it's the same thing. Sarah's next big vacation, Chris's career, your perfect little life. You get the trips, the weddings, the houses, and I get whatever's left over. I'm done pretending that doesn't bother me. Silence. I could almost hear her searching for something to say, something that would magically make this all better. But there was nothing. Look, she finally said, her voice softer, like she was choosing her words carefully. Maybe we haven't seen things from your perspective before. I scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. But running away like this isn't going to solve anything. This isn't about tonight, Emily, I said, rubbing my temples. It's about every single time I've been pushed aside, every time you guys got to build your perfect lives while I was just trying to survive. I needed help too, and all I got was a damn toolbox. More silence. In the background, I could hear the muffled sounds of home, laughter, the clinking of dishes, the murmur of casual conversation. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just walked out. Like I didn't even matter. Just come back, Emily said eventually. We'll figure it out, okay? But I knew better. This wasn't something a single conversation could fix. They didn't get it. Maybe they never would. I need time, I said before ending the call. I shoved my phone back into my pocket, leaned against the bench, and stared up at the sky again. The stars were still there, unmoving, uncaring. A part of me wished I could feel some kind of peace looking at them, but I didn't. Not tonight. I didn't sleep much after leaving the park. By the time I made it back to my apartment, my mind was still racing, looping through every moment of that dinner, replaying every word, every glance, every smug expression. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how things had gotten to this point. How could my own family be so blind? I get it. They were busy with their own lives. But was it really that hard to see how unfair things had been? How lopsided it all was? I sighed, closing my eyes, but sleep never came. The weight of everything just sat there, pressing down on me, refusing to let go. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I even wanted to fix it. As the hours stretched on, my thoughts kept circling back, not just to what had happened at dinner, but to everything that had led up to it. Years of being overlooked, of brushing things off as no big deal, when, in reality, every little slight had stacked up, one on top of the other, until the weight of it all became impossible to ignore. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about money. Sure, the financial disparities stung, but the real issue ran deeper than that. It was the way I had always been treated, the way I had always been left to fend for myself while my siblings had everything handed to them. It wasn't even that I wanted their help. I just wanted them to see me, to acknowledge that I existed, that my life mattered just as much as Sarah's and Chris's. Lying there in the dark, I realized something else. I wasn't angry anymore. Frustrated? Absolutely. But the fire that had burned so fiercely earlier had started to die down, replaced by something else: exhaustion. A deep, overwhelming tiredness, like I had been fighting for a place in my own family for so long that I had nothing left to give. I didn't know when I finally drifted off to sleep, but when I woke up the next morning, everything felt clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Nothing was going to change unless I made it change. They weren't going to wake up one day and suddenly realize how unfair they had been. That wasn't how this worked. If I wanted them to understand, I had to make them see it for what it really was. The problem was how? A part of me wanted to just walk away, cut ties completely, and move on with my life. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. As messed up as things were, they were still my family. I didn't want to erase them from my life. I just wanted things to be different. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long time that morning, staring out the window at the empty street below. The world outside was still, the early morning quiet stretching across the neighborhood. And then it hit me. I had spent years trying to explain how unfair things had been, dropping hints, making small comments, only to be brushed off, told I was overreacting, that I was just being bitter or jealous. But numbers don't lie. If words weren't enough to make them see the truth, maybe hard facts would be. I wasn't sure if they would listen, but at the very least, they wouldn't be able to dismiss me so easily this time. With that in mind, I spent the rest of the morning digging through old files, emails, bank statements, anything that could help me make my case. I had receipts for the tools my parents had helped me buy, but that was just a drop in the ocean compared to what they had done for Sarah and Chris. Piece by piece, I started laying it all out, organizing every document, every transaction, every email into a story they wouldn't be able to ignore. It wasn't easy. Every old email, every text, every bank statement felt like reopening an old wound. I found messages from my parents promising Sarah money for a down payment on her house. Then, I found a text from my dad explaining why they couldn't really help me out with rent, because they had already given so much to Sarah that year. It stung. More than that, it confirmed everything I had felt for years. This wasn't just something I had imagined. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't jealousy. It was real. And now, I had the proof. As I worked, my phone buzzed a few times. More texts from Emily, probably still trying to get me to talk it out. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. I needed to be prepared first, and I wasn't there yet. I ended up working on it all day. By the time I finally finished putting everything together, it was late afternoon, and I was drained. Mentally, emotionally, completely spent. But at least now, I had something solid. Something I could put in front of them and say, this is why I'm upset. This is what I've been dealing with. It felt like a victory, but not the kind you celebrate. More like standing at the top of a hill after a grueling climb, knowing you finally got proof that the struggle was real. Now they had to listen. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. They'd get defensive, especially Sarah. She always acted like everything she got was deserved, like it was never up for debate. But I was ready for that now. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the pile of documents in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was making a move. I was taking charge of the situation. Now, I just had to decide when and how I was going to confront them. A text or a phone call wouldn't cut it. This had to be face to face. But the thought of sitting in a room with all of them again after what happened at dinner made my stomach twist. It was going to be awkward as hell, but it had to be done. I knew they were planning another family dinner soon, for Emily's birthday. The timing wasn't great. Who wants to drop a bombshell at a birthday dinner? But honestly, when was there ever a good time for this conversation? There wasn't. And I wasn't about to sit around waiting for the perfect moment while another year passed with nothing changing. So that was it. I'd confront them at Emily's birthday dinner. It wasn't going to be easy. It was probably going to explode into another fight. But it was time to stop pretending everything was fine. I wasn't going to be the forgotten one anymore. When the day of Emily's birthday dinner arrived, I was nervous. I had everything ready, every document, every receipt, every email and text that proved just how much my parents had favored Sarah and Chris over me. But knowing I was about to walk into a situation that would be uncomfortable, messy, and almost definitely end in yelling, that didn't sit right with me. I wasn't trying to ruin Emily's birthday, but there was never going to be a perfect moment for this conversation. It had to happen, and it had to be now. I got to my parents' house a little early, maybe to give myself time to calm my nerves, maybe just to make sure I didn't back out. When I stepped inside, everything seemed normal, like nothing had happened at that disaster of a family dinner just days ago. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, focused on the finishing touches for dinner. Dad was out back, flipping something on the grill like he always did when the weather was nice. No tension, no signs of anything being wrong. And then there was Emily, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. She glanced up when she saw me and smiled. "Hey, Michael. You good?" She said it so casually, like nothing had changed. Like we hadn't had that conversation, like she hadn't called me in the middle of the night, trying to fix something that wasn't going to be an easy fix. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. But I wasn't fine. My heart was pounding, and the folder under my arm felt heavy, like it was burning through my sleeve. Like a weight I had carried for years that I was finally ready to drop. But not yet. I had to keep it together. Because before the night was over, I was finally going to make them see. Sarah and Chris arrived not long after, laughing and chatting like nothing had ever happened. It was almost impressive how easily they moved on, how effortlessly they brushed things under the rug. Meanwhile, I'd been carrying the weight of this for years, every slight and unfair moment stacking on top of the last. And tonight, it was all about to come crashing down. Dinner started the same as always. Mom asked about work. Sarah went on about some upcoming vacation with her husband, and Chris cracked a joke about how he still couldn't believe how expensive weddings were. I sat there, barely touching my food, waiting for the right moment. Then it came. The plates were mostly empty, the conversation had lulled, and everyone was settling into dessert. I put my fork down, my hands steady even though my heart was racing. "I need to talk to you all." The words came out strong, more confident than I felt. Everyone looked up, confused. Dad raised an eyebrow. "What's up, Michael?" I took a deep breath, reaching for the folder beside me. The weight of it felt heavier than paper. It was years of resentment, bottled up frustration, a story I had never been allowed to tell. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other night," I started, keeping my voice even. "And I realized I've never really laid it all out for you guys. I've been carrying this around for years, and it's time you see why I feel the way I do." Mom shifted in her seat, her eyes flickering to the folder in my hands. "Michael, can't we just enjoy the evening? It's Emily's birthday." "I know," I said, cutting her off before she could guilt me into silence. "And I'm sorry, but there's never going to be a perfect time to do this. I need you all to listen." Without another word, I stood up, walked over to the living room, and hooked my laptop up to the TV. The room was quiet except for the clicks of my mouse as I pulled up the presentation I had spent days putting together. The first slide appeared, a simple chart. It listed each of our names with a number next to it, the amount of money my parents had spent on us for education. Sarah's name was at the top, then Chris, then Emily, and there I was at the bottom. The difference wasn't just noticeable, it was staggering. "What's this?" Chris asked, leaning forward slightly. "This," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking, "is what I've been dealing with." I clicked to the next slide. This is how much you spent on Sarah's tuition. A large, bold number filled the screen. I clicked again. This is how much you spend on Chris's graduate degree. Another hefty figure. Click. And here's Emily's. All her student loans covered. Silence. Sarah and Chris exchanged uncomfortable glances, but neither of them spoke yet. Then, I clicked to the final slide. And this, I said, is what you gave me. $7,000 for tools. That's it. No tuition help. No house down payment. No wedding fund. Just $7,000. The silence in the room was deafening. I let them sit with the numbers, let them really look at it. Mom's face paled, her lips pressed together like she was fighting back tears. Dad was frowning, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice soft, unsure. Michael, I didn't let her finish. I'm not saying you didn't help me, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm even though my chest was tight. But you cannot sit there and tell me this is fair. Just look at the difference. You gave them everything they needed to get ahead, and I got leftovers. Dad let out a long sigh, leaning back in his chair like he was already tired of the conversation. We gave you what we thought you needed, Michael. You never asked for help with school. I clenched my jaw.